In this video, we are going to plan an implant case in the coDiagnostiX software. Step number 1, I start by adjusting the panoramic curve. Step number 2 is CT segmentation. So I want to segment the 3D view over here. As you can see, we have both the maxilla and the mandible, and we have many artifacts. The scan is not very clear. Let's start cleaning out the 3D view. In order to do that, I'm going to go to the drop-down in Segmentations. And now I have a new window over here to segment the 3D view. Step 1, once I open this window, is engaging segmentation mode. Step 2 is choosing a color for the segmentation. Let's say green. Step 3 is naming the segmented area. Let's call it mandible. Step 4 is adjusting the threshold. I'm going to move this slider upwards. So by that, I am trying to clean out as much artifact as possible. While moving the slider upwards, you are going to realize that the bone itself is disappearing. And if you move it all the way up, all the bone is going to disappear, and the teeth, which are the most radio-opaque object, will remain. I'm going to move back until I reach a specific point where the mandible is pretty clear with the least artifacts. So let's say this view is pretty good. I can see the mandible and I can see the teeth. The next step is I want to cut out the maxilla. So I click on this icon and start drawing a line between the maxilla and the mandible. And then the final step is I color the mandible with the color I chose at the beginning, which was green. In order to do that, I'm going to go to that icon, click on it, and fill the mandible with the color green. Now I am done with my 3D segmentation. Next, I'm going to click on this button over here to close the segmentation module. And now, I have a new item in the segmentations list. So I'm going to choose mandible. And that's our new 3D view. The reason why this part is white is because there is an anterior cutoff in the scans itself. Our next step, since it's a mandibular case, before adding any implants, is segmenting the nerve canals. So in order to add nerve canals, I can go to either number 3 and click on Add Nerve Canals, or go to the plus sign and choose a specific nerve. And then if you click on any of these, you are going to find the new list of the nerve canals. I'm going to start at the left nerve canal. So I'm going to right-click on Left Nerve Canals, choose Positioning Mode to engage it, And now I'm going to find that my cursor has a plus sign because it's ready to add points to segment the nerve. My two favorite views to segment the nerve are the panoramic view and the cross-sectional view. So I'm going to click on this arrow over here and choose the split mode. Click on cross-sectional and panoramic views. Of course, before segmenting the nerve on the panoramic view, I have to disengage the virtual OPT so that I could scroll through the scans until I can see the nerves. I'm going to zoom in using the magnifying glass. And again, I'm going to engage the positioning mode. And now I can see the nerve canals clearly. I'm going to start adding points. And if there is a point you want to delete, you just right-click on the point, then click on Delete. Or you can hold the mouse button on any of the points and drag to move it. And if you can see over here, I reached this area, and the canal kind of disappeared. So I am going to keep scrolling until it reappears. That's because we have to move through the slides buccally and lingually in order to fully trace the nerve. Now I have reached a point where it is not clear anymore in the panoramic view. So I'm going to move to the cross-sectional view in order to evaluate the nerve position, also to help you locate the metal foramen. So that's my canal. I'm going to start adding a new point. Once I am done with tracing the nerves, I am going to again engage the virtual OPT to give me an idea of how the nerve looks. So that's the anterior loop, and that's the metal foramen. As you can see over here, the missing tooth is number 20. And that's exactly where the nerve is. So segmenting the nerve is really important. Now I am done segmenting the left nerve canal, and I'm going to start segmenting the right one. Again, I'm going to click on the panoramic view and maximize it. Disengage the virtual OPT. Choose the cross-sectional and panoramic views together, and then go to right nerve canal, right-click, and engage positioning mode. And again, my cursor has the plus sign, so I go straight to adding points to the canal. I always prefer to zoom in before I start working. And now while I am scrolling through different panoramic slices, the canal is really obvious. So now we are ready to place virtual crowns and implants. We have a clear 3D view, a clear panoramic view, a clear left and right canal. As you can see, we have number 20 missing, and the space is pretty tight, so it's impossible to place an implant over here. So we are going to start planning the right side of the mandible. That's the premolar. So we need to add, let's say, the second premolar and the first molar. Right before placing implants, the reason why I take my time and place virtual crowns is because virtual crowns make a huge difference by helping you visualize the emergence of the implants. Sometimes if you place implants in the long axis of bone and you have good bone support all around, and you think everything is all right, but once you place the implant, clinically you realize that your emergence is too far and requires custom abutments. And that's why I always take my time and add virtual crowns. So to add a virtual crown, I am going to go to the plus sign here and click on Tooth, choose number 29 and 30, and then the software randomly places the crowns somewhere close to the mentioned area. Now I need to move the virtual crowns. Make sure that Modify Object Position is highlighted. Then I'll start to move my objects in any of the views. I can move in the cross-sectional, tangential, 3D, or axial. I don't recommend moving any object at the panoramic view because the panoramic view is a superimposition of different panoramic slices, and it's a curve, so sometimes the crown might get distorted. You can double-click on any of the crowns. That opens up a new window with editing tools on top that make it easier to move the crowns. I scroll through the cross sections, take a look at the adjacent tooth, and start imitating this adjacent tooth. So I need to move just a bit to the buccal, and I think it looks pretty good in terms of positioning. As you can see, we have 3 arrows: yellow, green, and blue. The yellow is to change the position of the crown. The green is to change the size of the crown, taller or wider, etc. And the blue one for angulation, so I could rotate or tilt the crown. Once you are satisfied with your virtual crown, click OK. Next, I am going to double-click on the molar and also adjust the tooth. And then hit OK. Now I have my two virtual crowns in position. One of the best views you can work with on the virtual crown is in the 3D view. Click on this eye and choose Superior to have a superior view of the mandible. Now I could trace the arch, and I could tell that this tooth is a bit buccal compared with the adjacent tooth. I can left-click and drag and change the objects, or right-click and drag to change the angulation. Now, I am going to start adding implants. Click on the plus sign, then on Implants, or if I am going to use a specific implant like number 29 or number 30, I could click this drop-down arrow, then add Implant, or finally I could click on shortcut number 4. And all three options open up the implant library. My favorites list already has some of the implants I use the most: BioHorizons, Zimmer, Camlog, Nobel, OCO, Straumann. So let's choose Zimmer. And I'm going to choose any random size. Let's say 7 by 8. Then choose my teeth. Number 30 and 29, and click OK. Now I have my implants perfectly placed below my virtual crowns. Next, I'm going to start planning number 29. And my favorite view to start planning is the cross-sectional. So I am going to double-click on the cross-section view to maximize it, and click on the magnifying glass to zoom in. I will click on the Modify Object button to start moving the implant. Then, I'm going to move the implant a little bit apical to be in bone. It's obvious that this size is a bit wide for this case, so if I need to change the size of the implant, there is a shortcut on the strip at the bottom of the screen that you can see over here. I have some details on the implant, and I have options over here to change the width and the length of the implant. I'm going to switch it to 3.7 millimeter implant. And I'm going to choose a longer implant, let's say 11.5 millimeters. If I place any implant and it's too close to the nerve, I get 3 warnings. The first warning is on the implant itself, another next to the nerve, and the third one is on the strip at the bottom of the screen. So I know there is something wrong with the nerve. I either move the implant upwards or use a shorter implant. In order to measure exactly how much bone we have, I need to add a measurement. So I'll go to the plus sign, click on the pins, and choose 2 random points. Let's place one on the implant and one on the buccal court, and I get a reading over here of 1.3 millimeters. Again, I do the same process here, and I get 1.2 millimeters. In order to know which part is buccal and which part is lingual, you have the name lingual on the lingual part and vestibular on the buccal part. I'm going to scroll upwards and downwards alternatively in order to compare my virtual crown to the imposing tooth and to the adjacent tooth. Now I scroll to tooth number 28. The space it has is more or less class 1. So I'm going to place my virtual crown also in class 1. My premolar here is a bit buccal, so I'm going to move just a bit to the lingual and angle it just a little more lingually in order to be in a class 1 occlusion to the opposing arch. And still, if you compare to the adjacent tooth, it's more or less on the same curve. Still, I know that I am emerging a bit towards the lingual, so if I need to correct that, I need to change the angulation of the implant by right-clicking and holding on the apex to change the angulation of the apex. Right now, we are emerging from the center of the virtual crown. I'm satisfied with that position. Let's try to measure our new buccal bone. Again, click on Distance. Choose Points over here. That's 0.9 millimeters. Now I know that anything below 1 millimeter will get fenestrated out of the bone. Usually we prefer having at least 2 millimeter to 1.5 millimeter at the minimum. But sometimes we have bridges, so we try to keep it at a minimum of 1 millimeter. So I'll move the implant a bit to the lingual, and as I move the implant, there is a reading that will tell me the distance I am moving the implant in millimeters. And there is a green line telling me exactly the directions I am moving the implants in. And also a measurement telling me how far I am moving. Once I am satisfied with my implant in the cross-sectional view, my second favorite view in evaluating the implant is the tangential view. The tangential view allows us to evaluate the implant by rotating 180 degrees all around it. I'll now go to the icon on top that I skipped first while explaining the icons. This is the implant with the two green arrows, and it's called Align Views. This symbol is very important because it locks the view on the implant. So if I need to evaluate the implant from the tangential view, I can lock the view on the implant. Again, the tangential view is evaluating in 180 degrees all around a specific point. So while I am scrolling through this view, the implant is disappearing and reappearing again because the specific point I am rotating around is not the implant. If I need to make it the implant, I am going to lock the view on the implant and start scrolling. As you can see over here, in the right corner, there is a number that keeps changing. That's the angle of where exactly I am evaluating the implant from. So, once I reach 0, I know that I'm looking exactly from the buccal view. This specific point over here tells us how important the tangential view is, because from the cross-sectional view, we have good bone and the implant looks good all around. But from this view, it's very obvious that we are too close to the adjacent tooth. So you can see why this view is very important. You can evaluate the implant and its relationship to the adjacent structures. From this view, I can also see that the crown is a bit tilted. So I am going to choose the crown, angle it a bit mesially, and start angling my implant as well to be away from the adjacent tooth, because the roots of number 28 are pretty long and tilted. And we have to keep a safety distance between the implant and the root. In order to confirm that, I click on Distance and click on a point over here and a point on the implant, and see that the reading is about 2 millimeters. To be honest, that's not my favorite view to measure the distances to my implant and adjacent teeth. Usually I go to the axial view and start zooming in and scrolling downwards until I reach the apex of the root. And once I reach the apex, I start measuring a point from the apex to the implant. And that's about 1.3 millimeters. That's an example that the tangential view can be sometimes deceiving. The axial view is more precise to measure distance between implants and adjacent teeth or structures. With some scans, you can't really tell where the root is if the bone is too dense the root might not stand out in the scan. That's when the Hounsfield unit reading icon comes in handy. If I mouse over the bone over here, I get a reading of about 1220. And as I move the cursor around surrounding bone, I get a reading of about 600. I keep moving the cursor slowly until I see a big jump in the Hounsfield reading. And I know exactly where the bone ends and the root starts. So I can measure the distance between the implant and the root accurately. Going back to the axial view, I'm going to move the implant a bit distally and then re-evaluate from the tangential view just to make sure that I am still emerging from the center of my virtual crown. And now I am pretty satisfied with my implant. For number 29, I am using a 3.7 by 10. I am more than 2 millimeters away from the metal frame, and I am emerging from the center of the virtual crown in a good relationship with the opposing tooth. I have good safety distance away from the adjacent implant, and I think it looks pretty good. Now, as I am scrolling through the tangential view, in some slices I can see that the bone thins out buccally. So now I know that the collar will be exposed out of bone. If I measure it from the first thread to the buccal plate, it's about 1 millimeter plus or minus. So now I know that I have to augment the buccal collar of the first thread, or another option is I could move the implant to make it a bit subcrestal just to avoid augmentation. Once I am done with number 29, I am going to move on to number 30. Again, start at cross-section view, zoom out just a bit, so that's our virtual crown. That's the opposing tooth. In order to be in a Class 1 occlusion, I am going to move the crown just a bit more to lingually, so that it's in a better relationship with the opposing arch. And then I'm going to move the implant to be in bone. If you can see over here, there is a yellow triangle with an exclamation mark, which means either I am too close to the nerve or I am too close to the adjacent implant. Also, I see a warning at the bottom right. I know that I am too close to the adjacent implant. Of course, that is not possible to evaluate from the cross-section view, but from the tangential view, it's going to be very clear. So I am going to finalize my implant at the cross-section view and then move to the tangential view. I am going to move the implant just a bit lingually, angle it more to buccally to be emerging from the center of my crown. We have 4.7 by 8 millimeter implant over here. Seems that it's not a good idea, so I could definitely go longer. I'll choose number 10, 11.5. Still, I have no warning to the nerve, so right now we have 4.7 by 11 implant, and it seems we have a wide bone. We have about 2.4 millimeters buccally, lingually. So now I am done with the cross-sectional view. I am going to go to the tangential view. I can see that I am pretty close to the adjacent implant. I can either click on distance and measure between both implants, or I can choose axial and scroll down until I reach the apexes of the implants, where they are at the closest relationship to each other. It's about 2.9 or 3 millimeters. There is an easier way to do that by clicking on this warning distance of the implants, and the software tells exactly how far my implant is, which is 2.7 millimeters. Now I know that I need to move implant number 30. Let's say from the axial view, I'm going to move it by 0.3 millimeters. And now this warning disappeared. Before evaluating the distance between the two implants, I just need to adjust the angulation of implant number 30. So I'm going to scroll till I see 0 degrees on the bottom right, so that I know that I'm looking exactly at the buccal view, and start angling my implant to be emerging from the center of the crown, and also make it a bit more parallel to the adjacent implant. And that takes us to the other icon I explained, which is the implant with the angulation ruler, which tells us exactly the angulation distance between all the implants we have in our plan. Right now, the angulation distance is 4.8. I'll try to make both implants as parallel as possible. Right now, we have reached the 0.1 degrees, which basically means implants are perfectly parallel to each other. Let's check our implants from the 3D view and see how parallel they are. They look parallel to each other, but they are a bit buccally inclined, which is also obvious from the cross-sectional view, and a bit to the buccal. So I am going to angle it a bit more to the lingual, and now the angulation difference is about 1.6 degrees, which is easily restorable if you want to stint both implants together. Back to the tangential view, and start evaluating my implant. For number 30 all around, the crown needs adjustment. From this view, I can see that my crown is occluding with the upper 2 molars. So it seems like it's a bit big, but in terms of occlusion, it's occluding with the upper 2nd molars, so I'm going to keep it as it is. But I'm going to have to move my implants a bit distally to be emerging from the center of my other virtual crown, and to avoid any distal problems. I am going to scroll again 180 degrees all around, and make sure that everything looks fine. Again, as I am scrolling all around, I keep my eyes on the nerve. I have good emergence from the center of the crown, and I am in a good relationship with the opposing arch. I have at least 3 millimeters away from the adjacent implant. because I have no errors appearing over here. I think our plan looks pretty good. In the panoramic, it seems like our implant is inside the nerve. Also in the 3D view, it seems that the implants are too close to the nerve. But that's because our implant is too lingual. So I'll take you to the cross-section view. We are close to the foramen, but we are lingual, so there is no problem. And that's why the panoramic view is not the best view to evaluate implants from. That's basically how to plan a case from scratch. In this training, we covered all the icons and tools of the software, the top and the left part of the screen, how to adjust a panoramic case, how to segment a 3D view, how to trace and segment the nerve. We evaluated the implants all around. Thank you very much for watching.